I haven't got the timing on the lives off just quite yet. So I think my first thing is always, I think we're live. So, so we should be live. So, sure I have everything turned on here. Good morning. It's Saturday morning, March 13th. Welcome. I have a series that I do here on Facebook and YouTube for friends and following and those in the Nebraska area that are engaged politically and interested in different events going through the community. So it's a little segment I call March on Omaha Live. And what we do is we try to bring different candidates, different causes, different nonprofits, things like that. So we can try and kind of help raise that awareness and get some community engagement. And so welcome everybody. This morning I'm super excited because I get to visit with Cammy Watkins. Cammy Watkins is running for Omaha City Council District 3. Good morning, Cammy. Thank you for being
here. Thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to say I've actually known you for a couple of years now. I think the first time I don't know if it's the first time we met, but the first time we had the opportunity to sit down and visit was for that interview that we did with the British news. And so that's kind of what first got me familiar with you. And I've kind of followed your work since then. And I'm just very excited to have somebody that's so involved in our community running for office. So I want to give you a moment to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
Yeah. So I'm Cammy Watkins, she, her, hers. So I have born and raised in Omaha and actually consider myself like a second generation Omaha. And I think that's important to say, especially for people of color, because I think often folks don't assume that we're from here. I get a lot of, oh, so where are you from? And I'm like, I'm here, born and raised here. My mama's from here. My grandma's been here since she was 15. And so I went to Omaha South for those that care to know, and then went away for college in Mount Vernon, Iowa, a tiny little town, in a little liberal arts school called Cornell College. If anybody's from that Cedar Rapids area will definitely know that. And I actually went to college on a vocal performance scholarship. So not super widely known fact about me, but I thought I wanted to be an opera singer. When I grew up, I fell in love with opera through going to Omaha South. I had the opportunity to work with Opera Omaha, and they did a program called the PACE Project. I have no idea what that acronym stands for. Now I think it's like Performing Arts and Education or something. And I got introduced to opera in my freshman year and fell in love with the genre. Finally found music that fit my voice and that I could do all of the things and was expressive. I was an extremely shy kid. So, and I now always border on that middle between introvert and extrovert. So I'm an extroverted introvert is what I call myself, which, so campaigning and all of this is an exciting world and was a huge decision for me to make. And I realized I had to know who I am and had to be really firm in my identity and what I'm about before I could decide that I was going to run. And so I would say there was a series of events and things that happened which led me to this decision. But the main one is leaning on, I think, I've always known that I have a purpose in this world to make a difference. And I didn't know how. So I've always just kind of followed whatever kind of path or fate has led me to making that difference. And a few years ago, I started thinking, should I run for office? And then I chickened out and was like, no, you don't want to run for office. Politics is hard. It's scary. People are mean to you. And then I, again, kind of had the opportunity to take this kind of identity journey. And I decided to do that through the eyes of my grandmother and my grandfather. So, and I traveled to various cities to just learn about her. And that inspired me to see that my family has been a leader and have been trailblazers in many different places all around this country. Like in Arkansas, several of my family members were the first African Americans to integrate the school district in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And they've always approached everything with no fear, family, and love. And so as I kind of started to think about, okay, what am I most afraid of? That shouldn't stop me from trying to make the difference. And so that was probably the real catalyst for me to say, okay, I need to run, and I have to figure out what I want to run for. And it was a chance trip to Cleveland and seeing some amazing activists, city council members that were doing great things, both for the economics of the city, but also for the people. And I thought, okay, city council's it. I'm going to run for city council.
That's awesome. I think so many people have been inspired, like more regular people, not your normal political type that you would think going into office over the past years, they have been inspired to run. And I think it's fantastic when we see so many people that are involved in the community running. So thank you so much for that. I know when you reached out and said, hey, I'm going to run, I was like, let me know what I can do. Like, that was it for me. I was like, we have our District 3 person. Sounds great. When you talk about your work in the community, I kind of mentioned to you earlier that even though, I know you and I'm familiar with your work and what you've done, just looking through kind of this list of accomplishments and impact that you've made on our community over the past 20 years or something has just been, it's just amazing to watch. Or to read through. Some of it is, it talks a lot about, or you talk about on your website, how you went to Cornell College and then you produced a rock horror picture show in support of LGBTQ people. And that kind of inspired you or kind of led you to your work in the community and advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how it kind of put this fire in you to advocate for others?
Yeah. So throughout college, I joined a social and service group, and the focus was that it was really about building community, but also we had a very strong service and giving back requirements. So everyone had to do those things, but that was one of the main reasons I wanted to join. So essentially, they were sororities and fraternities, but they weren't branded in that way. So it's social and it's service. And so that gave me a really great opportunity. And so I did like some mentoring, and then there were all of these leadership programs. And in your senior year, you got a chance to do a leadership program where you got to shadow an executive director. And I was really on this cusp of, well, I know I'm going into arts administration. I may not be an opera singer, but I'm definitely going into the arts. So I should probably shadow for something that is my second choice, which is community advocacy and networking. And I care very much about underserved and marginalized communities. And they paired me with the executive director of a small nonprofit in Iowa City. And it was the first and only of its kind probably in the area that served youth in junior high and high school that were in the LGBTQ plus community. And that decision, I think, was the change set the course for what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be in life. Having the experience to work with these kids, and the youngest kid was 12 years old. And so this is 2001 to 2002 in Iowa with a bunch of kids that were so brave. And they did this art project. And I still remember it that they had this art project where they had them do a mask of what's the face that they put on outwardly and then what's happening behind, what people don't get to see. And the pain and the struggles that so many of them were facing, broke my heart and also activated it. So I knew that I had to, this was the work that I was going to need to be doing in my life, helping individuals that just others are so easily pushed away, and that we only look at the surface and ignore that there's so much happening for every individual, even the most beautiful child. And they were also raising money because there's not strong funding for queer youth in 2001 in Iowa. And I had talked to the executive director, and she's like, yep, we're struggling. And being involved in the theater world, I had several of my friends had just finished a really popular run that was sold out of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I reached out to them and said, hey, I want to do a fundraiser for these kids and to try to raise money for this organization. Would you all be willing to do a one night only concert that all the proceeds just go to these kids. And my friends were like, absolutely. And so we put it together. I think we did it in like a month. And the funny thing is that the friend that helped me do that, he wrote my bio. Like it's writing bios is the weirdest and most awkward thing ever to do. And and he does theater still. He's an educator. He's a brilliant actor and singer. Stephen Burge is his name. I'm going to call him out because he's amazing. And I said, Steve, you know me probably more than anybody else, and you're a beautiful writer. Could you write my bio? Because I won't say what I do and I forget. And like, I honestly like didn't realize how impactful that moment was until he reminded me of it. And I think there's so many things that I've like tried to do and help people, and I didn't realize. Like for me, I was like, it's just a small way. I was just trying to help. I don't think it was only $1,000. It's not a huge amount of money, but like I forget that small actions can have a huge impact, and so that's how that all kind of came together, and it just kind of spurred that. Like you don't have to have all the resources or all the things. You just have to know a few people that are also passionate and care, and we can make changes or do great things.
I think that's awesome. I grew up in Western Nebraska, and my brother is part of the LGBTQ community, and that would have been in the 90s, early 2000s, and definitely we have made progress, but it's because of actions like that so many people took. And I remember being young and the impact that the Rocky Horror Picture Show had on me and my brother and those that were part of the LGBTQ community. And I just think it's awesome that you did that, and that sparked, and it clearly led to other things. Because I mean, just going down the list is lots and lots of stuff on employee rights, affordable housing, environmental sustainability, equity. One of the things that I did not know until I was reviewing your website is that your work, that you led efforts to increase energy efficiency in new housing, led for firefighters to install sprinkler systems in new business and multifamily housing developments, and you earned the national attention of Glamour magazine for one of 70 female eco achievers, alongside environmental leaders like President Obama and EPA Director Lisa Jackson. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened? Like, how'd you get into Glamour? What, I mean, to be even on a list with people like that is just.
Yeah. So it was President Obama's. Lisa Jackson was the EPA director. President Obama wasn't on it because it was actually just women. It was just eco achievers women. And so like
so he didn't get a spot because he's
not a woman. Didn't count. He wasn't part of it yet. Like I tell you that. So working for the Sierra Club, and I was there for almost 7 years, and that was the greatest opportunity I probably could have had to get my feet wet and see the full world and breadth of organizing, both in politics and in community. And I kind of worked my way up. I started as just like the base level community organizer, and then kept just getting these opportunities, which for me felt really weird because people kept telling me, Cammy, you're doing amazing work. I was like, I'm just doing the work. I was like, these people over here are like closing down power plants and doing like really, and also then substituting that with other good jobs and green jobs. So like, they're doing great things. I'm just out here kind of advocating for energy efficiency. So it's not a big deal. But our national communications coordinator said, hey, Glamour Magazine's reached out to us. They've asked us to nominate a few people for this spread that they want to do for Earth Day with eco achiever women. And we want to put you on there. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Like, it's not just you, Cammy. It's like several of our other folks. I was like, okay, cool. I never thought I would have ever been selected. And so they then called me and said, yeah, Glamour picked you. I was like, what? So I got to go to New York, and we did a photo shoot in Times Square. We met at the Tavern on the Green. I met Ermeline DiCaprio, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's mom. So she had a national nonprofit around environmentalism. Hope Solo at the time had the green sneakers. So and it was actually Hope Solo and a couple other women in my little small group. So they put us in like little groups, pods, and then took the pictures. And so, but we all just kind of fellowshipped for like an hour in this tavern on the green at tables. And I sat there and I happened to be sitting at the table with Lisa Jackson. And she was like so warm and so caring. And I just said to her, I said, Lisa, I shouldn't be here. Like the women in this room have done amazing things. And I started like seeing them all on TV with documentaries and this great like eco justice work that they were doing. And I was like, I just do some policy wonk stuff with building codes for the country. Like that doesn't mean as much as like this on the ground work you all are doing. And she said, Cammy, you deserve to be here. And you hold your head up. She's like, no one knows that like where you're from, because everybody else was actually from the coast. So I was one of the few people from Midwest.
Represent.
Yeah. And so she said, you are just deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. And don't you ever discount like your power. And I was like, okay, Lisa Jackson. And I think she had not quite been appointed yet. So I can't remember if she had just been appointed, but I did not know who she was. While I was talking to this woman, I thought she was just this really lovely, sweet, beautiful woman. Turns out she's Lisa Jackson, EPA director. So I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So yeah, it was this really beautiful experience. It was probably one of my first, especially in the environmental work, being surrounded by so many women that were doing amazing things all around the country and globally. Because Kirianka, I don't want to mess up her name, but when they did the live action Pocahontas movie, and they actually were very intentional about it, the young woman who played Pocahontas is still a very involved environmental activist. She also was part of this shoot and was there as well. And lovely, very humble, quiet individual. I didn't get a chance to have a long conversation with her, but just like kind of chat a little bit. And so there are just so many amazing women that I still have the magazine. I keep that. And I had told everybody, I'm sending it out as my Christmas cards. You're all getting, this is Gary. I was the one time I was in Glamour. But like when I go back and I look to see like, what are these women doing now? There's still so many of them that are still deeply involved in this work, which is beautiful.
Well, and I think that is beautiful. And kind of when you talk about like, oh, I shouldn't be here, I automatically think about, all of the studies and research we see about how women often don't give themselves the credit that they deserve for the actions, that they're taking. A lot of times it does prevent us from applying for that new job or running for office or, something like that. Whereas we feel like we have to have all these qualifications to be worthy. And so I think it's awesome that that you were a part of that and that you had that conversation and that you were able to kind of break down those barriers and see that you definitely have done incredible work and are worthy of representing us. I think just like you represented us in Nebraska, I'd be happy to have you represent us in the Omaha City Council. I have a couple of questions here I want to go ahead and submit before we get too far along. So Bonnie would like to know, what are the boundaries of your district?
Yes, so District 3, the boundaries are roughly, so we go all the way to the river to about 90th Street. So essentially from the Old Market to Countryside Village is the east to west. And the north-south is a little more kind of wonky, but essentially it's Dodge Street is our northern border and then to center, but there's a few little areas where it kind of little hooks out, and we encompass the Gifford Park and the Joslyn neighborhood, Joslyn Castle neighborhoods up to about 49th Street. And then on the eastern side and on the western side, we hook out as far as Grover Street and a little niche into the interstate from about 60th, 50th Street till about 78th.
Good to know. She's also curious, how do you sign up for a yard sign?
Yes, so we underestimated how many people would want our yard signs. And so we are making another order, but if you just go onto our website and do the contact us form, and just put your address on there. We're going to add you to the list. We are going to be adding a new contact form on there specifically to ask for yard signs soon, because we just didn't expect. We ordered 100 and we're like, that should be enough, right? And then it's like, we need a yard sign. We're like, and now we're out. So we do have signs. We are out of posts. So if you have a post that you, because we had some mess up signs where it still looks great, they just cut off the top, so you have to just staple it. And so we have those mistake ones that they gave us anyway. So if you've got a yard, the like U-shaped post, we've got a sign that we can get to you now. Or if you just have a bunch of extras, a former candidate that wants to donate those to me, we could use about 25, because we do have 25 just extra signs without posts, and then we can get those to you. But either way, go to the contact us form, or you can email us at hello@Cammy4Council, exactly as the website.com, and we'll get you on the list and get one delivered to you.
Awesome. Alrighty. And just a shout out to those watching. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments, and we will make sure to get all of the questions answered for you that we can when we have Cammy with us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, first of all, on your website, you guys have your vision, and your vision is to empower Omaha residents to build a sustainable, inclusive, and thriving city that provides opportunities now and into the future. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that vision?
Yeah, so it was important for me to and this is just also how I do the work that I do, as well as that we can't just always focus on what we don't like. We have to focus on what we want to build. And so my campaign manager had talked about, okay, let's set a vision. Let's set our values and let's set our vision. And then that way we can center everything that we do before we even start thinking about our platforms or our priorities. We needed to know what's the Omaha we want to build. And it's really like envisioning an Omaha that's created for all of us, and not saying that it's all like we all have the same need or the same specific Omaha, but that it's a place for we and a place for me. We can be both, like in that duality that we so often ignore in the human existence doesn't have to be our future. And that we know that what I'm making today, I'm 40. Like the community that I should be building isn't just for me now. It should also be thinking about who is coming up behind me and who are the folks that are already here before me. There is a plethora of brilliant activists that have been helping to make this city great, and they've like etched along and kind of started to tick on those pieces, which allowed me to be here to do the work where I've kind of been scratching away. And then the folks that come behind me should be able to scratch away as well, and hopefully maybe finally uncover that gem that we've been working towards that we know can exist in the city. So that's really kind of our vision of why we wanted to set a vision, and why it's kind of set out with community in mind and with equity in people, and sustainability, because we cannot promote a stable city if we don't have a sustainable one.
Awesome. I read that and I was like, that's a fantastic vision. I think especially, and you and I visited a little bit before we went live about this, this summer was really traumatic for the city of Omaha. We had the Black Lives Matter protests and the discussion around police violence, police brutality. And then that was also kind of displayed in our city. We did lose the life of a young Black man who was also a father, James Scurlock. And I kind of spoke with you a little bit earlier about how I feel like maybe some of us don't feel like we're seeing results. You know, we had a specific cry this summer about what was wrong and what we wanted to see. And while we have had some state legislation and some stuff on the city come up, I think a lot of us that were involved in the protests this summer don't feel like we're seeing maybe the results or the demands that we had. So can you speak a little bit just to kind of this summer's racial unrest and kind of your perspective, your view, and how you think as a city council member you can help us heal that trauma from this summer?
Yeah. So I, in the space that I work in, I was really close to a lot of this work because we've been doing so at Inclusive Communities, where I'm the deputy director. Our mission is to confront bigotry, prejudice, and discrimination, like period. And so when all that was happening, mind us, this was all happening while we're also going through a global pandemic. So our community was already hurting in the trauma of this disconnection, and then to add that additional trauma on top of it of seeing George Floyd murdered on national television, not on national television, but to see it replayed over and over and over and over, is traumatizing in so many other ways. And so when we see the response of the people, it's not just for that incident. And I think that's where our city has not done a good job of addressing this, is that we kept saying that, believing that the outcry from the community was only about George Floyd. It was a yes and for our community. And I think that's where we're struggling to see where progress is happening. Now I'm in a fortunate position where I'm at the table with a lot of business leaders, not necessarily this city's leaders, but I had the opportunity to be at the table with city mayors in other cities in the state. And to see, okay, we need to make change, and how do we do that? And the cities that contracted or reached out to us to say, can you help? One of our biggest advices is that you have to include the community in these conversations. And whether ended up working with those cities permanently or not, it was, you have the obligation here of transparency and acknowledging and being critical of where are we falling down and failing, and not looking at failure as the big scar on us, and that, oh, well, if we admit it, then that means that we're bad. Failure is an opportunity for growth. So just because you fall down doesn't mean you can't get back up. But we cannot solve anything if we don't acknowledge first where we're not doing right. And I think that's been the biggest struggle for Omaha's local government in moving this. And this is also why we don't feel like the activists and advocates that were working hard to get things changed feel like much is happening. Now, that's on the surface. There are conversations, and I've been privileged to be part of some of those conversations about what can we do, what actions can we take to really make real change. I would love to, but those happen often in the one-on-ones, behind the scenes, not in public. I would love to see those happen more publicly, because that's how people see that change is happening. And I think we also have to fully acknowledge still, just because the actions aren't happening on a larger scale, the trauma and the pain and the harm caused from those things are still occurring. And if we don't actually create some sort of town hall about race in this city, and not just bring the typical actors and the leaders, that's one of those pieces that I kind of spoke out about in this time that frustrated the heck out of me, was that everyone was always, let's go grab the Black leaders. Who are the Black leaders? And I was like, why do we have to have leaders? We didn't have an election. When there is an issue with a white person, do we all say, let's bring all the white leaders and the white pastors out to pray and to tell all the white people to get together? We don't do that. So why do you expect that for Black people or for Native people or for Latina people to have these leaders that they're the only ones that can speak for the diaspora of our community? And so that was something that just irritated me. And that when I had the opportunity, or I saw it kind of popping up of who are the leaders we should be, anybody can be a leader. Where are the spaces where you are already interacting with folks? Folks would come to us and say, hey, we are looking for a Black leader to speak at this panel. And it's you don't have any Black people in your company that might want to come and speak from their lens as an employee of this company about how you're doing in terms of racial equity. And if you don't have any leaders in your company that are Black, that's your first problem. So let's start to work a pathway and a plan that you can start to uplift and find out how you're getting input about how you do your work from the people that already work there. Because if we just keep thinking about bringing in new people and we ignore the people that are already here, we're not doing anything. So I think on the city level, it's going to have to start with a true truth to reconciliation process. There is the work that they're doing. I've heard people say that Omaha is a trauma-informed city. And so now I need us to start to prove that. Because for me, a trauma-informed city should have a mobile mental health unit. A trauma-informed city should have a definition of community policing. A trauma-informed city should be working to what does an anti-violent crime prevention policies and processes and reform look like. And these are conversations that I've had with individuals in power or with at least some sort of influence to kind of shift that. And I tell you, each time I talk about these are the things that I stand for, I get, we agree. This is also what we want. Unfortunately, we don't always see that publicly. Yes, in our Native community with Zachary Bell Hills, absolutely. And we saw some changes happen in the police department, but we didn't necessarily hear. That's when they started having the mental health practitioners, and I think the city is now up to 5 that work with the police department. But I would love to see, we know that there's several situations of mental health beyond that shouldn't have to require a police interaction. So how do we have a response unit that can address somebody that might be experiencing a mental crisis? We don't know who to call as a society because we have not been given those tools. Those things can happen, and if we're talking about public safety and a broader scope, public safety should include a whole slew of resources and not expect one entity to carry all of them.
Yeah. And that's kind of part of the conversation we had before, it's not even regardless of, how your relationship feels with the police. I feel like after the summer, my relationship with the police is pretty damaged, but regardless of how you feel about the police, it's just unrealistic to ask them to be social workers, mental health workers, child safety workers, plus officers, first responders. I mean, there's only so much one person or one
entity
job can actually handle. And so I appreciate that. Another thing I want to point that you spoke about that kind of touched home is this idea. So I do live in North Omaha, and I know that through my entering into community organizing and advocacy, I think and it, probably because I'm white, right? Like there was a learning process of making sure that I wasn't seeing the Black community as monolithic, right? We do have a tendency, and I'm going to just say that I think a lot of it is because since we aren't as integrated of a city as a country as we should be, a lot of times white people don't have a lot of Black friends or don't know a lot of people of color. And so I think that you want to include those voices. So you start looking for different leaders that you can just kind of listen to. And while the intent might be good, it's harmful because definitely in North Omaha, and I've heard it, said on a few different things, they'll be like, well, we consulted the community leaders of North Omaha. And I'm like, really? Because I can list like 10 people that don't know what's happening, and I would consider them leaders in our community. So I think it's great that you bring that up, because I do think that it's one of the things living here in North Omaha I do see as a disadvantage, because it leads to a lot of people feeling unheard. So I think
and I think it leads to a lot of tokenization, because in that some folks they are only ones that get to have the voice. And the idea is that I don't fault those individuals that get selected, because again, they have little control over this. And it's an entire system that's built to assume that we should all just be following a leader. And that's based in, histories of slavery and white supremacy and racial inequity of, all right, well, the Black folks need to be led. And that's there were books that believed that our mentality, we had a supple brain, which meant that we had a higher need to be subdued and controlled. And so I think that kind of stems from some of those root um, falsities that are in our history that people need to work to overcome. And it's okay. Like, we can get past that. We have to just acknowledge its existence and then feel like you can feel bad, but don't sit on Shame Island. Because Shame Island, we can't get anything done there.
Right.
Right? How do we say, okay, yep, I have been responsible for that? Sometimes just that simple acknowledge, you're like, I have to be, I was racist. I have been a person that's been racist. And now I'm working towards an anti-racist or an anti-violent or an anti ableist kind of mentality. We're all working towards some sort of anti something mindset. And it's in that work that we can actually get this work done.
All righty. So I'd like to go over your platform a little bit here. So one of the things that you talk about on your website is community care. Can you kind of define that for us and what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the community care investments is essentially what the full kind of title of that, but it's hard to put all of it at the top. But like the community care investments is really like my commitment to work on the city council level to ensure that we have security, stability, and a quality of life for all Omahans that guarantees us like a clean environment, one that's addressing and a commitment to addressing climate change, accessibility and transportation, as well as for our individuals with varied mobility, access to mental health services, and increased supports for individuals experiencing homelessness. Like I had several conversations with several different people as we were trying to formulate our plans and what we wanted to stand for and what we wanted to be about and priorities for the campaign. And there were reoccurring themes around what is actually quality of life and what does the good life actually look like. And in that, we found like a thriving wage and just access to the same qualities for everyone in this city. So while I don't know what that looks like specifically, because there's a lot of things that the city council has support control over, and then there's several things that we don't. But that the city council is an office of influence that we can use our influence to try to move those power entities that can to move to these ideas. So this is really just about my commitment to address these issues in the best way that we can in the city council. And with our mayor in collaboration, because if we don't actually start to even acknowledge that these are things that need to be done to promote the true thriving economy and community that we wish to be, then we're not going to reach it.
Yeah, I appreciate that focus on community. And I also appreciate hearing you say that even if it's something that maybe the city council can't directly impact, they do hold an influence, and they can kind of be leaders in this. I think right now that there are, some members of our city council that don't feel that same way, unfortunately. And they're just kind of like, meh, not my job, like, meh, I can't do anything about it. So to hear somebody that's willing to acknowledge the boundaries and, of what they could and couldn't do, but also recognize that they are a leader and an influencer in our city. And even if it's not something they can specifically change, they should be working to influence that so that our community can move forward and be healthy. And now public Wi-Fi.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
So the public Wi-Fi came from a few of our priorities specifically came because of COVID. And I know that folks are like, oh, well, we're rounding the corner. COVID's almost done. What COVID did was shine a light on so many inequities that had always existed. And it just spread that inequity to several more people. And so Wi-Fi and access to internet was one of those inequities that got very much highlighted during this pandemic. And in particular, I think Wi-Fi and access to the internet has been considered like this fringe benefit for us, but we have now realized it's a necessity. It's an absolute necessity. And when we have like over 10% of some of our populations having no access to the internet at all, that means they can't work, they can't go to school, and they can't communicate with family and friends, because that's how we're doing all three of those things now on a regular basis. So to have over 10% of our population not be able to have that is a problem. So we want to start with, and there's several entities and cities, municipalities across the country that are implementing these public Wi-Fi processes. Council Bluffs has it in their downtown area. So I think we have to get started on this, and the idea is maybe like the downtown area. I think we would be completely missing an opportunity if, with this riverfront redevelopment, we do not lay infrastructure and groundwork to make that a public Wi-Fi hotspot for our area residents. And then also start looking at, as we're doing, continuing the CSO and the sewer update work, which is not done, is still going on. We should be putting infrastructure for free public Wi-Fi in those areas, in parks and in cultural centers. That's the start, so that we have places, because there's so many, a huge parks network in our city, that if just every public park at least had that, we have a space for some families to be able to kind of get that you can then maybe get boosters that it can come into your home. I know many of the municipalities have their public Wi-Fi in these cultural centers that it doesn't access into buildings, but that there's things that we can start to work on. That becomes the first step. So I think our introduction of this as a priority was, we need to take that first step, because we haven't done it yet. And what this brings for our economy, for tourism, is huge, but it also brings for the individuals that live here now just another resource where the only time that a kid can access internet for school, or a parent, is to go and sit in the parking lot of the school or a business that might have a free Wi-Fi. Wouldn't it be nicer is that if you do live right across from a park, you could get a booster, and then that works in your home, or at least you can sit on your front porch and do some of that connectivity. And then by the city investing in this, it's also going to increase the broadband, because we know that broadband speeds are much reduced in our eastern part of the city. So we want to build these, like each step is going to connect to something else that's going to create greater connectivity and greater access.
And I think it's interesting when you say about sitting in parking lots, because when I was in college, I was a single mother trying to put myself through college, and internet just wasn't something I could afford during certain periods of time. And there were definitely nights, because, you know, between, I was also working and I had a kid and whatever, and I would take my daughter, who was little at the time, and she'd be in the back seat, and I'd give her, you know, a book and some toys or something, and we'd drive over to Metro Community College and sit in the parking lot so that I could try to do some research for work. Also, or for school. And then also, I know that when my husband and I were living in South Omaha a few years ago, we had CenturyLink, and our internet was just slow and kind of messy. And so my husband had contacted them and was like, hey, you could talk about all these, you know, speeds, like what's going on here. And they essentially told him that our area wasn't updated and that it wouldn't be until more money came into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, my husband, I remember him getting off the phone almost shocked, because he's like, they literally basically just said, you live in a poor neighborhood, so tough,
yep.
You know? And, but then at the same time, I also know that I have a friend out west that has been bringing attention to the fact that it's not just North and South Omaha that don't have access to this. There are folks out in West Omaha that need it too. So it really is an entire city thing that needs to be addressed. So, and not just city, but state too. I have, you know, friends.
Oh yes, gosh, our rule.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely appreciate that, especially like you said, COVID definitely did kind of bring up some of these inequities that have already existed. And hopefully that even if COVID leaves, we can get leaders like you in there that remember everything that came up from it and doesn't just, you know, oh, that was COVID and now we're done.
Mm-hmm. We're back to normal now.
Yeah.
And then it got those lessons. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So your next one on your list is equitable housing. This is another one that I'm really interested in. It's pretty obvious when you go over your website that you are pro working class, like folks like me and my husband that are, you know, that paycheck to paycheck category. trying to get by or whatever, I look at your stuff and I'm like, yes, public Wi-Fi, affordable housing, food security. Like, these are all things. It feels like you're really speaking to people like me, the working class. And so I appreciate that. And equitable housing is something that we really struggle with here in Omaha. For my experience and the experience of several of my friends, a lot of times if you're fine, I mean, we have a slumlord problem. I'm just kidding. We have a slumlord problem. I halfway joked around a while ago that, if you pay $1,600 a month, you can get out of a slumlord and maybe get a dishwasher. I mean, it's availability is ridiculous. Pricing is ridiculous. You think, oh, well, maybe you want to buy, but my friends that are trying to buy are having like a horrible time. Housing is just a problem in Omaha. So speak to me a little bit about that and what you can do to help once you're in the city council.
Yeah, so housing is probably the main priority that I knew I wanted to run on before talking to anyone else. And the same way that you say it's like a lot of these things speak to you, it's because it speaks to me because this is also the life that I've lived. Like, I grew up in a single parent household. My father, once my parents got divorced, my dad stayed in Texas, and so my mom moved up here to be with her family for additional supports. And while we don't fully define this as homelessness, but couch surfing and going from living from house to house was something that we did until we were able to get into the Omaha Housing Authority program. And then my mother had the subsidized housing. So if it wasn't for that, we would still have for much longer been just living with her siblings. And even throughout our time while we were in the OHA housing, family members would hit a rough patch and move in with us. So like so we talk about like the homeless population from the lens, people only think about those living on the street, and they're not thinking about these working families that if something happens, we're living with other families to try to make ends meet. And that's why it was important for us to say equitable housing, because the lens and the view of what affordability is so small that it leaves out an entire swath of people. Which is you, me, our teachers, like individuals that nonprofit workers, all of those police officers that all fall within that kind of middle income, because the median income, or no, the average income in Omaha is under $60,000 a year. No, it is the median income is under $60,000 a year. So that's half our city. And we keep building developments and making plans that don't take these individuals into account. And what this does is it like takes down the opportunity for economic growth for realtors. It takes down the opportunity for economic growth for businesses, because people don't live in their offices, or hopefully they shouldn't be. So we can't recruit new people to come here because we don't even have the housing stock that they can afford to live in the jobs that they're working when they come here. Don't get me started on the minimum wage, but I just want to point out, you have to make $18 an hour in order to afford a 2-bedroom home in this city. And our minimum wage is $9 an hour. So why is our housing at a level, the cost of our housing higher than the minimum wage of our income? So I think on the city council level, we have to, one, identify that housing is a basic human right. And then two, again, use that influence. There's a lot of bills going through the legislature right now. And there are amazing advocates in housing. Erin Feistinger, if you're not following her on Twitter, follow her. And then there is because there are large numbers of the landlord association that is fighting against these bills, that we know that there are great landlords in this city that support these bills. So we need the good landlords to stand up and say, hey, this isn't the industry that we want to create. Our property owners, we don't need to do this. We shouldn't have a fight against a bill to stop retaliatory evictions. Like, why is that a fight? And we've got our first housing package that just got passed through the judiciary hearing, and so I'm excited to learn about each of those. But one of the biggest things, and we've seen the city of Baltimore just adopted this, a right to counsel. So that any individual that's in a housing eviction court, and also if you've read Eviction by Michael Desmond, if you haven't read it, read it. So many insights in there on what we should be doing, what are the solutions that a city can take on. But I think something that we should probably looking at as a low-hanging fruit in the city of Omaha is this right to counsel. There's a right to counsel coalition that meets regularly to talk about and advocate for the bills on the legislative level. I think we as a city could adopt that as well, that people aren't going into these eviction courts without counsel. And there are landlords, bad landlords out there. I don't want to like put them in a big group the same way. I don't want us to group people of different identities that, but there's a particular landlord that out there has a YouTube channel explaining to landlords how they can get around the CDC moratorium on eviction. So while the CDC, in the midst of the pandemic, had a moratorium on evicting individuals because they didn't have the money to pay because everybody lost their jobs, were teaching people the loopholes so that they could evict individuals. And I think Aaron just posted yesterday a stat of all of those eviction cases that were working on some of those loopholes. 100% of the property owners had counsel in 5% of the tenants, which that 5% equated to 4 people. And if you have representation, that's one of the best ways to deter an eviction, to figure out how do we get money. Like everybody, we understand that property owners have bills to pay as well, but let's figure out how do we work and give money, because there are resources. There are ways that property owners can specifically request dollars as well as renters. And there's processes that we should be working together, not against each other. But if we don't put in place some of these basic things to say, like, what's the definition of affordable housing? And how are we intentionally as a city promoting and incentivizing that development, not just incentivizing any development that seems cool because we love to do projects city, but we don't think about what's the end to the means to that end of this project. Is it actually meeting or fulfilling the needs that the city has? And if the answer is no, then we need to consider saying no. Not to say, no, we don't need any development, or we just say, okay, yes, and here's the modifications that we as a city need for this to actually be something that's going to meet the ultimate goals and values of this city going forward.
That's awesome. It's interesting that you bring that up, because even as somebody about the kind of the couch hopping or whatever, so there's definitely been more than one occasion where my husband and I and the kids have went and stayed at my brother's, or my mom has gone to my brother's, or my brother has moved in here, we call it, in between our houses or whatever. But the reality is, we're staying with each other to save up money to be able to get a house, or we're staying with, and while we may not view ourselves as homeless at that time, because we are lucky to have the supportive family to help us out, it's definitely not housing stability. So it's interesting to kind of have that, that view on it, because I, as you speak, I'm realizing you're right. When I think of homeless, I just think of people without houses, and there is a much larger area that needs to be reviewed. I also absolutely appreciate the idea of right to counsel. My husband and I have been in a situation where the landlord was being kind of shady, and we knew he was being shady, but what are we going to do, right? We were lucky that at the time my brother had some money to get a lawyer for us, but that was $800 for the lawyer to make sure that we weren't falsely getting evicted from our home. With that lawyer, we were able to go to court. His stuff was dismissed. Of course, we were wanting to leave by then anyway, but we got the time that we needed to do it, and it was handled fairly. Without having been able to borrow that money from my brother to get that, we would have been, me and him and 3 kids trying to figure out where to sleep in, a week, because the landlord had money and power and influence that my husband and I did not have. So those are excellent points.
And
really
that's it's not justice. Like, we talk about our justice system, we need to also define what is justice. And isn't justice equal opportunity for both individuals. It's like equality under the law. Hi, a little bit.
My daughter, sorry. Go upstairs, baby. Mommy's still on. Sometimes their dad forgets that he's on dad duty.
We're at home and doing work, so it's fine.
This is just life now, right? Is where I'll just all right. So on the last thing that you have listed on your website is food security. So can you talk to us a little bit about food security and how you can provide that?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you 100%. This is the brilliance of the amazing asset to our city, Nancy Williams. When we thought about, I had conversations with Maria Vasquez over at Metro Community College, the Fort Dodge campus. I was connected to her through a friend, and she was talking to me about in the pandemic, and this was the second one that really the pandemic highlighted for us, a problem and a need. And she said, many of our students are struggling with food security. And so definitely the food banks, and they created like a mobile food bank and all these really great things. And that's what sparked for me, okay, let's look at this problem deeper. And I reached out to Nancy Williams with No More Empty Pots, founder of No More Empty Pots. And she, like, half the information on our website and that platform came from her, and her brilliance and the amazing work that she did during this pandemic to help bring not only to bring healthy farm fresh foods to our communities. And so she brought up for me the term food sovereignty. So it's about how do we look at addressing this problem where every single zip code in this city had individuals accessing food banks and food shelters during the pandemic. That means that way too many people were 1 or 2 paychecks away from hunger. And we shouldn't have that with the amount of opportunity around urban agriculture and CSAs and community supported agriculture. So I wanted to look at how can we as a city invest in all of the beautiful resources that already exist here by using our budget as the document to help us fund and invest in the things that we need to do. I know that Omaha doesn't want to be a city that is known for having people suffering from hunger. So if we don't want to be that city, we need to invest in uplifting these programs, which are uplifting individual communities, which then uplifts individual people to have food sovereignty, where we can be growing our own food so that when we have these crises, like we did with workers had to choose between their job and their health so that we could continue to feed the country, we shouldn't have that. So if we do more, like if we had individual local producers and we were providing laws that allow for people to be a producer and a butcher and a processor on a smaller scale, promoting those local small family farms, we decentralize the system and actually gives us more stability for crises, these climate crises and others that are going to continue to happen. These are inevitable. So we have to look at the reality of our world as it is today. And the reality is we need more neighborhood focused processes for food, for education, for retail, and those basic human needs, so that when mass crises like this happen that shut down those big epicenters in the way that we've designed our cities, we still have a way to support each other through entrepreneurship and just kind of community connection.
I love that. And I love that you bring climate change into it, because that's what, when I was campaigning, that's one of the things I talked about a lot. I'm like, we're going to have to make these changes. With climate change, we know that we're going to see more of this. It's been predicted that with climate change, we're going to have pandemics and things like that. We're seeing all of this, the polar vortex, we're seeing all of this play out, and we need to be prepared. So it's not even a question of, do you believe or not? This is happening, and we better start being prepared so that we can make sure that our communities have a way to navigate through the things that we know we're going to see. So I love that you have the idea of local in mind and how we can help local, but also with that overall picture of where we're really at as a nation and a country and a world when it comes to climate change and the impact that that's going to have on things like our food security. We have a question here. Will you work to stop the spraying of poisonous herbicides in our city parks? I've seen people picking dandelions to take home to eat. It's a great salad. Spraying them is bad for the honeybees and other pollinators. So,
yeah,
how do you feel about herbicides?
So, I actually like Mark. I was not aware that we were spraying those. Like, because I know that there's been several lawsuits, and that Dave Domina has been really, especially around against Monsanto and those types of places where we're seeing they're carcinogenic and they're causing huge problems in our agriculture. So there's a better way. And it's not that we don't have those technologies to do that. And so absolutely, let's talk about, we know that we have to address certain like herbicides and some things like that happen, but there are natural ways to do this that don't harm people because yep, dandelions are edible. Folks may not know. Now, I may not always advocate for you to go and eat the dandelions in our parks. The same way that we can't advocate for people to fish in Lake Zarinsky or, well, if it's no longer there, but what was down in Lehima because of the amount of runoff and poisons that were gone into those lakes.
So I had a conversation with Senator Carol Blood a while back about just kind of how polluted our water systems and stuff in Nebraska really are from things like this. And it had me like, we got like filter on our house now. I stopped using any kind of chemical at all in our garden. I mean, once you see I think we go down and we don't think too much of it, but they have big consequences and big of impact. And I didn't realize, I mean, I guess I never thought about it, but I didn't realize there were herbicides at the city parks either, but it makes me kind of creeped out now, you know, thinking about how often my kids are playing on the grass and rolling around. And
so I look forward, well, because I'm actually working, thanks for that question, Mark, because we're setting up a chance to talk. So I'm excited to get a chance to chat with you and learn more about all of those things, because there's just stuff. Yeah. And this is the other thing. I'm not going to know everything. And I think too many folks don't run because they're like, I don't know this. You don't have to know everything. You have to know where you can go to find the information, though, and not just sit in that apathy of like, well, I don't know, or it's out of my hands, so I'm just not going to do it. No. So I love that people like Mark exist in our community, as well as like Nancy and all these other beautiful human beings, Aaron, that can help nourish me and my information so that I can do a better job for all of us.
All right, so we are getting close to time, and I know you're a busy candidate, so I won't. We got one. I'll take one more question, and then we can talk a little bit about how to help out your campaign and finish up here. But I want to hit Mark's other question. What is on your shirt? Because of the large block with your name.
So it's the Women Who Run, I Am Speaking Kamala Harris shirt. They updated it, and now it says Vice President Kamala Harris, but I got it before the election. So yep, that's what it is on there.
Awesome. All right. And then how can we help support your campaign? In addition to donating money, can we volunteer time?
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. Volunteering your time. Our goal is to recruit 100 volunteers. We're at a little over 80 right now. So please go to the website, and it's the Cammy for Council, and the Get Involved page is where you can sign up and join the Cammy Corps. We'll get you a Cammy, like a mask and a Cammy Corps t-shirt for you. We absolutely right now especially need volunteers to do lit drops and literature drops. Lit drops for short is basically contactless canvassing, where you're just going around and putting the information in the door. We want to be COVID conscious, so we're not doing door knocking. If you encounter people organically, please talk to them, but we're not imposing in that way. And then we need help with phone banking. We have tons of postcard writers. We love every single one of them. And if that's what you're really into, we will sure take, but we desperately need phone bankers and folks willing to lit drop.
Awesome. And then I've got across the screen your website, so you can learn more about Cammy, and you can also donate money. We definitely understand that campaigning takes money. It was one of my least favorite parts was trying to raise money, but it definitely is needed. It's funny too, because you could go for nonprofits and you could be like, we need money, donate to the nonprofit. But for some reason, when you're the candidate, you're like, I need some money. It feels different.
But, you give me money. Sorry.
But it does take money. It does take money. And then, and we were going to talk on this a little bit, and I know we're kind of running out of time, but you are running as a nonpartisan. And so I know that, you don't quite have some of the party supports.
I don't have any. I don't have any of those resources. Right. And I absolutely, like, it was with intention that I'm running as an independent. I've been an independent, and I feel like this voice has been purposely squashed and forced into one of those boxes. And this is a nonpartisan race. Our state legislature is a nonpartisan race. I think there was intention when the founders of those two entities made these purposely nonpartisan, and I want to respect that. But also, I think we need less politicians in public office, especially locals. We need policy makers and idea people. And so that's why I'm not part of a party.
See, and I actually love that about you. I'm part of the Democratic Party, but I tell people all the time, we got the two parties. I know there's some, third party type things, but mainly the two parties. And then we talk a lot about bipartisanship. And to me, that's compromising, which is okay, but it's compromising in kind of a weird way. I'm like, what we should be striving for isn't bipartisanship, it's nonpartisanship. These are the problems. These are some solutions. Now, how do we implement them to best help as many people as possible? So whenever I see somebody running as nonpartisan or identifying as nonpartisan, I feel like that's really the way it should be, I think, in order to get the most benefit. But it does take away from some of those party resources. So definitely, I'm going to flash your website again, make sure that we get out and we support Cammy and get donated, lit drops, phone calls, all of that, because we definitely want to support you and help kind of fill those barriers that come with not running along party lines. So, all righty. I think we've covered everything. It was so nice visiting with you, and thank you for being here. And is there anything kind of final you want to finish up? Say you feel like you got most of your message out?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and then also give a plug that it is the Women's March, Omaha Women's March is happening today, and so there's another candidate forum this afternoon starting at noon. And there are several amazing female candidates. We have a female candidate running in every district, progressive female candidates running in every single district. So please check out these other amazing women that I'm so fortunate to run alongside, whether they're in my race or outside of it. And we're just lucky as a city to have this many individuals really committed to promoting a better Omaha.
Yes, we are. I think I am going to vote for Jonathan Lathan for my city district too. But other than that, I'm pretty sure all my votes are going to women. It's so exciting. I'm like, Jonathan, he kind of messed it up a little bit for me. But otherwise, yes. It's all women. And I'm just super excited about. And not just that we're seeing more progressive women run, but I really feel like this year we're going to elect our first Black woman as mayor. I think that, it's just exciting to see the diversity and the dynamics that are coming into politics, because we are seeing more community organizers and advocates. And that's exactly what we need to solve. We can solve our own problems. We just need to be in the positions to do it. So
yeah, regardless of gender. Yeah, there's some great candidates that we have out there.
Yes. So, all righty. Well, thank you very much for being here, and good luck with your day. And everybody watch the other forums, get signed up at cammyforcouncil.com, donate what you can, and everybody have a great day. Thank you, Cammy. Have a good one.